Hello everybody, you can hear me all right? Great. So I've decided to use the lectern, a little bit different to what others are doing today. Firstly, I'd like to extend my thanks to Mikhail, Marian, Annie, and the DegameFi team for this opportunity. I've actually been looking forward to it. I need to preface my speech to say that there won't be too much detail on the slides, so if you would like to follow, you're welcome to take notes. I'm seeing some familiar faces in the room, and I've been very impressed with the speakers so far, so congratulations to the event organizers. I'm going to speak about 3 topics today. The first is leadership, the second will be dealing with crises, and we're in Web3, so we're not short of crises, and executive mindset. Firstly, a little bit about myself. I'm from Sydney, Australia. I left about 6 years ago. It's a very far away country, as a lot of you know, so getting out there and living in Asia and Europe just made a lot of sense. My background is in human resources. I currently work for a venture fund in Dubai. I'm an angel investor, and I've taken a niche in helping startups build advisory boards. And believe it or not, it's a very effective way to become more investable and to become basically a successful company. It's been quite a roller coaster ride for all of you as well. So the question is, why did I come here and to discuss this topic? Well, each week I speak to about 40 or 50 people. That's about 2,400 per year. In my capacity as head of HR and still a Web3 headhunting consultant. So I have a pretty good data set, and it saddens me to say that the biggest sadness that people have in Web3 is dysfunctional leadership. Broken promises is the single biggest grievance. It's not better opportunities elsewhere or anything else like that. It's broken promises. So, dear founders and CEOs, treat them mean, keep them keen does not apply to Web3 management. Many of you are from the Web2 world and have gone into Web3, just like myself, but for some reason we've forgotten about some basic management principles, and that's what I'm here to speak about today. So in the next 15 minutes, I would like to revisit some principles and hopefully have a positive reflection on this topic. But first, who in this room is a CEO or founder at the moment? Please raise your hand. A few of you. Hands up in the room who wants to be an executive. Yeah, down the front. And so I think it's a very worthwhile aim. And I'm also asking the question, can failure of Web3 projects and organizations be attributed to lack of failure? I believe many can. It's obvious that Web3 is a massive technological advancement, but I don't think we've grasped that it's a massive cultural shift as well. It's no longer about command and control structures. Culture is no longer from top down. Nor is leadership about being the funniest person in the room or being the most charismatic. I'll just give you one example. Harry Truman had very little charisma, but if you follow US politics, you'd know he was probably the most successful president in history. He knew the difference between what he wanted to do, which was to continue President Roosevelt's New Deal, and what he needed to do, which was to master foreign policy. This led to the containment of communism and in both Europe and Asia, and the creation of the Marshall Plan, which led to 50 years of economic growth. In our industry, Vitalik Buterin is an understated figure, and just look at what he's been able to achieve and continues to do. Instead, leaders and executives in Web3 must come to terms with a few key features. The question is, how can founders and the teams earn trust in a trustless paradigm? I'm referring here to transparency around custody, treasuries, liquidity management, and internal management. Understanding the importance of technology, the impact on human connections. Community-led product design is much faster now, and the product feedback loops are insanely fast. The relevance of their own existence of CEOs and founders is in question, because governance and ownership itself is decentralized and democratic. So being able to lead with critical thinking, creativity, and effective communication 24/7, the blockchain doesn't sleep. This is not easy to do. Project founders are now self-organizing. For the developers in the room, you will know, you're from around the world, and you work on digital platforms. Maybe you don't even speak with your project lead for 1 or 2 weeks. In other words, leaders must lead by example more than ever. In preparation for today's talk, I actually caught up with a handful of CEOs and managers, and we covered a lot of ground. I was particularly interested in how they approach and deal with crisis. We're an industry that can turn on a dime, and where there are many exploits in protocols and platforms. So this is what they had to say. Firstly, if you're a CEO, you're a leader, you're an executive, and you're going through crisis, firstly, maintain a healthy lifestyle. These people avoid alcohol and other substances, and they get a good night's sleep. When it comes to an actual response, leaders don't do it alone. They have an inner sanctum of colleagues that they confide in, seek advice from, and draw strength from. Resilience is probably the most important personal character that they discussed. And this grows with experience and having gone through a few hard failures, the school of hard knocks. It was said a couple of times that one cannot respond to everybody's needs. So if you're a leader, you need to be ruthless in determining a path, which may include deciding who you will disappoint. You must acknowledge skills and competency gaps that you have and find someone to fill those gaps and complement yourself. This applies all the time, not just in crisis, of course. Avoid being delusional. I have seen where many executives cling on to flawed visions and cannot accept that they're wrong, despite all the information. So you have to be able to admit that you're wrong and be prepared to pivot. A CEO of a lending protocol I had to deal with last year, he had his chief operating officer out of action for 3 months. 75% of his team was badly affected by the war in Ukraine, and the market was tanking. His advice: acknowledge the situation that you're in, to your team, to your stakeholders, and particularly to your investors. You must be honest. This will hopefully mean that you regain some trust, and then you can start making maneuvers again. Finally, identify where the finish line is. At which point could you be out of trouble? From there, you can roadmap and work your way backwards to that destination. These reflections were, of course, in hindsight. However, even in the crisis, these leaders set time aside to reflect, often in the shower, they told me. As we can see, the case for better leadership is compelling. So here are a few facts and numbers for you. What a CEO controls, which is the company's biggest chess moves, accounts for about 45% of a company's performance. 60% of new CEOs live up to their expectations within 18 months. That means 40% don't. They fail. 10% of companies create 90% of economic value. 1 in 12 companies move from being an average performer to being a high quintile performer over a 10-year period. So, as you can see, the case for executive mindset also plays a very big role. So here's a little bit of a standard answer to the question of what exactly is an executive mindset. The standard answer is that an executive is someone who receives responsibilities and orders from the CEO or a founder. It could also be a cabinet in a presidential system, or a prime minister, depending on which system you're familiar with. An executive can't afford to focus narrowly. They're responsible for overall performance and of the organization. They must be very critical thinkers. It was late 2021 when the CMO of a lending protocol and I concluded numerous interviews for an open position in his team. There was one candidate who stood out. They weren't the ideal fit for the role because they had some knowledge and experience gaps. However, they showed promising attributes: clarity of mind, conviction, and proactiveness. It was in this moment that Alex, the CMO, said to me, "They're not perfect, but they showed an executive mindset." To which I automatically thought, well, how can that be the case? This is a manager position. It was also an uncommon remark coming from a CMO, but looking back, I can see where he's coming from. Being an executive isn't just a title. It's a way of being, and pretty much anyone can get to that level. If you're familiar with Peter Drucker, a legendary thought leader around leadership, he identified 8 signs of an effective executive. The first, ask what needs to be done, as opposed to what you want to do. And unfortunately, this means tough decisions, and it may mean letting go of your staff to remain profitable. Every 5 years, Jack Welch, the famous US businessman, asks what needs to be done. And if these tasks fall into a second or third priority, he delegates it to something else, and he focuses only on the first priorities. Number 2, executives ask what is right for the enterprise. And I've just realized I'm actually not going through the slides. Here we go. Number 2, an executive asks what is right for the enterprise. Recently, a CEO asked for my advice when considering an equity investment proposal. The basis for the decision-making wasn't how do we protect our own interests and our own equity, but rather what's best for the company, which did mean sacrificing in terms of our equity dilution, but we knew it will pay off in the long term. Number 3, executives develop action plans, just like Arnold Schwarzenegger says. For without action plans, the executive becomes a prisoner of events. Plans need to involve achievable targets and realistic actions. Number 4, executives take responsibility for decisions, and a decision hasn't been made until people know the name of the people accountable for the deadline, the names of people who will be affected by the decision, and a great executive also conducts decision reviews to make sure they're on the right path. Number 5, executives are responsible for leading context. They over-communicate so that every single person in the team knows where they're headed and why. Number 6, good executives focus on opportunities rather than problems. Problems need to be solved, of course, but they don't lead to results. Executives put their best people on opportunities rather than on problems. Number 7, they run productive meetings. We all love meetings, don't we? It needs to be decided what is the purpose of the meeting and what form of preparation is needed. But all meetings need strong follow-up. And finally, executives think and say we instead of I. Effective executives know that they have ultimate responsibility, which can neither be shared nor delegated. When building advisory boards for startups, I look for these attributes, and I can safely say that the advisors that stick around for the long term are consistently effective. They do it every single day. Effectiveness is a discipline, and like all disciplines, it's a choice you can make. So some of you raised your hand earlier, and I invite all of you to elevate yourself to the executive mindset. Are each of us capable of these 8 executive mindsets? Yes, of course. Can we set our own directions and our own strategies for our own lives? Yes, we can. So this is self-leadership. I think it's pretty cool that we can decide to be our own CEO and our own executive. So this is the biggest way we will all capture opportunities and, of course, be ready for the next bull market. So thank you very much.